Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special bonus episode of the Wrestling Connection. This little extra episode that we wanted to chat about today on recording day. This is December 30th, 2020, a couple of days before the brand new year. And unfortunately, we got some very bad news the other night about the passing of one of our wrestling heroes, one of our wrestling brothers, part of the wrestling family. And the whole wrestling family were totally distraught and broken the other night when we heard the news, as we lost Mr. Brodie Lee, some know him better as Luke Harper, some even know him better as John Huber. And Glenn and I, who I've got Glenn with me here, as always,
Hello.
We just wanted to do a quick wee chat about our favourite memories of Mr. Brodie, what we remember from seeing him WWE and in AEW and that sort of thing. And first things first, I just want to ask you, Glenn, where were you when you found out? What was your first impressions, and what was kind of like the first sort of memories that come to mind when I say the name Brodie Lee or, of course, Luke Harper?
Well, being on this side of the pond, I think like a lot of us, I'm pretty sure you'd stayed up late that night, but because of time difference, most of us in the UK woke up to the news. It broke in the early hours of the morning on the 27th here, I think. And of course, I was just shocked. Now, every death is sad, and in a recent episode of the Wrestling Connection, we spoke about people who in wrestling that we've lost this year. And, obviously there were some really tragically young people in that list, but there was also, people like Pat Patterson who died at a very respectable old age. And there's just something that a little bit more tragic when it's someone taken so young at the age of 41, that Brodie Lee, Luke Harper, John Huber, at the age that he was taken at. So it kind of hit me like a punch in the stomach. And I think this always happens when you're a fan and you never knew the person, you never met them properly, you never had any relationship with them. But because you have so much respect and admiration for what they do, it punches. And then over the course of the next couple of days leading up to today, more and more memories of him and his career came to mind. So I can only imagine what this must be like for the people who actually knew him, loved him, worked with him. But you asked what memory comes to mind for me. If I may share a quick story,
please,
about him. So I never met him really officially. Like this story is like the closest I ever got to meeting him. I actually was tweeting about this the other day, so I'll keep it brief. I had the great privilege, as I'm sure you did as well, Chris, to have seen Brodie Lee wrestle in WWE live a few times. I wasn't really
Did we see him together? Sorry, did we see him in 2015 together? Did he wrestle Ambrose in the opening match of a house show once?
We definitely watched that once. It was an IC title match, I'm pretty sure.
That's right, yeah.
Which is one of my favourite parts of his entire career, was that post-draft split singles run that he had. That to me was the biggest sign in WWE that we saw of his potential. Like that was the first point where we finally thought we were going to get to see him get the push. And obviously we now you can't help but think that in All Elite Wrestling he was only just getting started, and I'm going all over the place now, but the first time I ever got to see him wrestle was in 2013. We've mentioned this before, Chris, like how in 2013 the WWE came twice, and you were at one of the shows and I was at the other, but on both shows the Wyatts faced Punk and Bryan. So I think I was at the first of those two shows, and we were down in like the third or second row or something like that. Me and three or four other friends. My good personal friend Jamie was one of them, who does the artwork for our show. And the Wyatts are super new at this point. They've only been in the main roster since August or July, since just before SummerSlam. And Bray wasn't wrestling; he was at ringside with his rocking chair, doing his thing. And Harper and Rowan are going against Punk and Bryan. And just like the difference between that show I saw and yours was that we then got a different main event, which was Cena versus Del Rio. But you could easily have gone home happy after this match, because, I mean, how amazing is that on paper? Daniel Bryan and CM Punk versus Rowan and Harper with Bray Wyatt at ringside. And it was at this show where one of my pals at the time, Callum, same guy who got into an argument with CM Punk at an earlier house show, told that story a few months ago. He was like heckling, and we were all shouting, and I had a bit more courage at the show, so I was getting involved with the heckling. Nothing rude, nothing that breaks the story. It's boo the heels, cheer the good guys, you know. And so we had some good patter of a bunch of different wrestlers that night, and we were shouting stuff at the Wyatts, we were shouting stuff at Harper, and Rowan was in the ring and Harper was at the apron, so his side of the apron was closest to us, so he was getting all of our like heckling. Right. We're like, "You suck, Harper! Boo! Boo this man! Harper sucks!" We were giving it all of that, right? And at this point, he didn't say anything on WWE TV. Why was the mouthpiece? And like, I don't think they said much at all for a long time. Like and if they did, it was a very scary single syllable word, "run," you know, something like that.
Yeah.
Like so I had no idea what this man sounded like. I had no idea what his actual voice was like. And at one point, he just turned around and looked at me at Callum, and he just went, "I can't understand a single word that you Scots are saying." And he just started laughing. And I thought that you would only get that at a house show, because he's supposed to be the big, imposing Luke Harper. And he just kind of breaks down laughing at us. I think he maybe admired our persistence, but he put us in our place, and we stopped. And so that's my only personal story involving him. As a fan, there's loads of other things I could point to that I loved about his career. But same question to you: where were you when you heard the terrible news, and what comes to mind when you think of him, the man?
Great, I love that story. I've not got anything like that. I've not got anything in terms of seeing him in person and heckling him and then getting a response from him. That's hilarious. But you're right, because he was mute essentially at that point, wasn't he? Him and Rowan were like Bray Wyatt's tag team, they're heels, So it was different. I would have been really fun to kind of hear that from him, And there's always that funny story he told on Chris Jericho's podcast, where like he is this sort of eloquent, well-spoken New Yorker from Rochester.
Yeah.
And I think Vince McMahon wanted him to do a promo one time. So like Harper was going over the verbiage for the promo, and Vince was like, "What is this with your accent? You should have a hillbilly accent." And Harper's like, "But I'm from Rochester, New York." And he's like, "No, Luke Harper's not from Rochester, New York. You have to be from the South." So then Harper's trying to do this Southern accent, and it was so bad that Vince just went, "Ugh, just use your real voice." I just think he's so well spoken. You hear him in AEW and you hear him in these promos and on podcasts and stuff, and he just seems like this like easy to talk to, funny storytelling guy. We got some kind of bad family news on Boxing Day as well, so we were having like a kind of down day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We were just it was one of those ones where it was late at night, and we obviously were buzzing off of Christmas and that sort of thing, and everybody had gone to bed. And now you don't really know me around this time of year. We've not really been this close around this time of year, but I go a bit mental in terms of making lists and the top 10 of the year and that sort of thing. And then I take it all too seriously, and I start thinking, right, okay, I can't do this top 10 unless I watch the matches again. So I've been up the past couple of nights rewatching some of the best matches of the year and trying to kind of put together the list of the top 10 and that sort of thing. So I was in a pure like wrestling mood, and this was about 2:30 in the morning, and I checked Twitter, and I saw Conrad Thompson had just tweeted the words "oh no," which is never good, because he's obviously surrounded by older gentlemen, like Ric Flair and Bruce Pritchard and Eric Bischoff and Jim Ross and stuff, and I was like, oh god. And then you scroll through, and I just saw the pictures of Harper, but I didn't really look at the captions. I just saw the pictures of him. I just thought maybe people are just tweeting about him. And then as I kept scrolling, I was like, you've got to be joking. And it's one of those ones, because he's literally in his prime and he's in the middle of his run, it kind of hits home a bit more, and it's more shocking than anything. I don't want to take away from other deaths, you know what I mean? That's the last thing I want to do. But we spoke about that last week on episode 37, didn't we? We were talking about all the people who we've lost this year, and how there was people who were totally out of nowhere, and then there was people who maybe have, hadn't been in the public eye as often. And I felt similar to when we found out that British wrestler Lionheart passed away. Someone right in the middle of his run, that had so much unfinished business and stuff. And it was one of those ones that was more shocking than anything. And I don't know about you, man. I don't know how I'm perceived by my friends and my peers and that sort of thing. If I had one wish for the rest of my life, I want to be looked at and admired and loved as much as he was.
Absolutely.
Listen, it was a tough situation. Obviously, I don't know him. I can't think about what his friends are going through and his co-workers and his family are going through. But the way people were speaking about him and telling stories and sharing pictures and flicking through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff was so reassuring and heartwarming.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
You're absolutely right. And I think it was Inside the Ropes, Kenny McIntosh, that said on Twitter that if there's anything that can be moderately described as positive that comes
Right.
from this, and this is always the case with tragedy, is that it brings us together, and you just wish you didn't have to take tragedy to do that. But there is something very beautiful about seeing people, regardless of what company they work for,
Absolutely.
embracing it. It's lovely to see All Elite Wrestling's Twitter account retweeting all the WWE guys. It's lovely
Absolutely.
to see Vince McMahon personally tweeting about him, even though he wasn't under contract to him. And you see Vince McMahon characterized as the kind of guy who we think about, when Umaga passed away, when you think about maybe people who were ignored, and you could maybe understand that it would seem consistent with that perception of who he is for him to ignore this death, but he didn't, and he clearly recognizes that Harper was a meaningful character in WWE, and obviously the man John Huber was well loved, well liked, and to your point, just not a bad word, just one endearing, happy story after another.
After another. And I saw that Cash Wheeler from FTR tweeted this as well. I was doing the exact same thing. I was refreshing Twitter every couple of minutes to see a new happy story. You know what I mean? They were flying in, and it was ridiculous. And you say about like other people retweeting stuff. Xavier Woods tweeted today the video of like the hype for Dynamite tonight, basically saying tonight is a tribute to Thing Me Please Watch AEW tonight. And Stephanie McMahon tweeted saying hashtag RIP Brodie Lee. Like, they're just not like ignoring that. And obviously there's people who, as you say, might not have gotten that treatment, but it shows how respected and how loved he was, you know.
You know what I would want, and I don't know like if this would happen on tonight's Dynamite or not. I would love for them to work together to produce the best possible video package for
Oh my God,
him.
that'd be great, yeah.
I mean, if they can do,
it's
I
not
know,
going to happen, but
I know WWE, it was a long time before they were ever working that way with Impact, but I mean, it's not for profit, you know. And it would just make sense for them to be able to do something definitive. Man, my mind is going everywhere about so many elements of his career that I loved. One of my favorite matches this year was Brodie Lee and John Moxley.
Absolutely.
It was like a Mick Foley style kind of
ECW, like on a higher level. Absolutely,
man.
That the Brodie Lee and Moxley match was great, but I also loved the dog collar match with him and Cody, which was his last match. And did you see that? Like the first time Brodie got pinned on national television was by Cody Rhodes.
Amazing.
And the last time he got pinned was by Cody Rhodes. It's mental. It's just one of those fate things that happen in wrestling all the time. The irony of numbers, as GR calls it.
I just wanted to quickly mention my love for, I think the first thing that I ever loved that he, like truly loved that he did, and that was the Wyatt family versus the Shield.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. As you say about like favourite memories and matches that come to mind. Obviously the Shield ones were great, but think about that run they had. The amount of tag team matches with Rhodes and Goldust, the New Day and the Usos and the Shield and Daniel Bryan and Kane, Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. There was so many great tag matches, but that one with the Shield, the one is what, Elimination Chamber 2014? Is that the one you think of?
Yep.
I think that was my match of the year of 2014.
And the Chicago Raw rematch was also great, but the thing is, everyone kind of thinks of like the classic Shield 6-man tag matches that they would have, where the Shield had the kind of right balance of guys in terms of body size, skill set, and that's what made them really work in the ring in terms of in-ring chemistry. It wasn't just about the presentation, but you can see the same thing about the Wyatts, because you got Rowan, who's this big powerhouse. You got Bray, who's more so at that point in his career, more of a kind of a character, and still is more of a character guy than he is a wrestling guy, even though he can still obviously get it done in the ring. And then you have Harper, who you think is just going to be a big lug like Rowan. No disrespect to Rowan, like he's a great power guy, but Harper is a big power guy. He could be your Kevin Nash, but bloody hell, that man could fly. It was amazing.
Crazy, right? The tope suicidas and then the strikes that would come off of that and stuff. Just an incredible performer. And someone that is literally in the prime of his life and career, doing a lot of his best work as the leader of a group that was, let's be honest, the group was not received well by wrestling fans. And they were thinking, right, how can we save this? Who can be in charge? And Brodie Lee was the chosen one, the exalted one, and did a great job for what he was there for. His clips on being the elite, so entertaining, so funny, and you just got to see him being a bit more of himself and a bit more driven in terms of a character. You know, more that he could sink his teeth into, as in Brodie Lee, instead of Luke Harper. Luke Harper was great, obviously, but there was some limitations there. And you talk about that run he had right before WrestleMania 33, when he had those matches with AJ Styles and Randy Orton and stuff, where it was like Randy Orton was a member of the Wyatt family, and Luke Harper knew that he wasn't who he was like saying he was going to be. He was like a snake, no pun intended. It was such a good story, and he had some great matches.
For a legit moment, I genuinely thought he was going to get added to the Orton Bray main event, and it would have made so much sense. You know, like if you think about like this, it's not in the same like. It could have been what I wanted the Legacy Triple Threat match to be.
Right, yeah.
Because that the Legacy Triple Threat match at WrestleMania 26 was it?
Yeah, 26. Yeah.
That match ultimately was a bit of a disappointment for me, but I wanted it to be this great story match where the whole thing falls apart, and that could have been like equally a great story match. Because the Orton Bray match is, as you know, fun as it is at WrestleMania 33. I think could have been a lot more, and those guys have since shown that they can do a lot more. And they showed in that angle subsequently that they could do a lot more. But man, I think if you'd put Brodie in that match, or Harper, I should say, that would have been cool. And I have to say, like, and this maybe seems a bit odd to say, but I'll try and explain myself clearly so you get what I mean. When I heard he was taking some time off after the dog collar match, I thought, oh, good, because that means he's going to come back and there'll be this new aspect to his character. He'll be doing something a wee bit different maybe when he comes back. Because I like we were saying, the Dark Order, a wee bit touch and go for me, and I kind of thought like that match of Moxley showed us like, and then the strap match as well, and the way that he squashed Cody for the title. Those three things showed me that this guy's going to be a world champion in AEW. This guy is really. We've yet to see the best of him in this company, and so I just kind of thought, great, he's going to take some time off. He'll come back in the new year, and it'll be even better. It'll be like the new generation of Brodie Lee, And obviously that's not happened, but it's so sad.
Yeah, just such a tragic one. I don't remember the last time that there was this much outpouring of support and love on social media. Obviously there has been. Obviously, it's not coming to mind straight away. But the way we think about Eddie Guerrero and Benoit and things like that, and those ones were like really affected the business and affected everybody in the business, and because everybody had a good thing to say about those people. Mm-hmm. I kind of put this one in that everybody was affected, everybody knew him, everybody seemed to love him. I wonder how this will affect things going forward, and I cannot wait for Dynamite tonight. Not because it's going to be this thing of glorifying Brodie Lee, but it's going to be this passionate, like full of fun and like all these memories about everybody's pal. You know what I mean? And it's going to be such a good show, and I hope everybody watches and I hope everybody tunes in and stuff. No disrespect to NXT, but I know what show I'm watching tonight,
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, big respect to Brodie Lee and AEW, and to a certain degree WWE as well, and all the best to his family and his friends and his loved ones going into the new year. Such a terrible time to lose anybody, never mind such a loving father and husband. So make sure you tell everybody that you love them, that you do love them, and you never know what could happen the next day.
It's true, and it's a message that we've maybe had to say a little bit too much this year, but it's true. You're not guaranteed tomorrow, folks, and when terrible things like this happen, usually the first thing I do is I turn around and look at my wife, who's usually right next to me when I'm reading this stuff, and I tell her how much I love her, because you just don't know. I got to see a couple of friends today for a socially distanced walk, and it was beautiful because it was a nice day, and it's been such a difficult year. And I told them both that I love them, because again, you can't. If this year's taught us anything, it's not to take anything for granted. So I think it's an apt message to close out on, folks.
Yeah. Well, I love you, brother. We'll see you next time.
Right back. Take care.